family tag team of reading and praying together. Power couple. There we go. Could be you. Could be you if you join the prayer and reading team. It's pretty easy. All you have to do is read. So, listen, some of us aren't that great at it. I get it. Good morning. Happy Time Change Sunday. Major Jesus points for all of us, okay? We did it. We nailed it. We're here. We lost an hour of sleep. Why do we still do that? I have no idea. As a society, it's ungodly. But yet here we are, taking an hour away from ourselves. Okay. Now I'm ready. I have bad news for you guys. Welcome to church planning. There's no slides. So if you have your little note sheet, you're going to have to really pay attention. You guys are in trouble. And I don't have any notes either, so we're just going to do it blind. Is there a leftover note sheet? Because I can use that. Bennett, is there a sheet up there? Oh, my guy. Never seen this before in my life. This is last week's. I just cut the new ones. Bennett, does that one say this week? No. Wait, is today the 8th? Today is the 8th, but this is last week's sermon. Yo, welcome to church planning. How?
It's like here too. It's all of that.
It's the devil. I'm just kidding. That's a sign. I got to redo this whole sermon. Okay, so we're gonna do last week's sermon. So if you're in last week's sermon, YouTube Live's not working. That's not working. Wow. You know what? God is still on His throne, and it's baptism service. Amen. All right. This is gonna be wild, but here we go. I haven't done a sermon like this in a hot minute with no notes. I'm sorry for you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and apologize. No, it's not. See what you got. It's how long can you sit for. I got no time frame. Here we go. I'm taking my jacket off. It's going to get sweaty. I'm just kidding. I'm already hot. All right. We are in Luke chapter 14. You're just going to have to pay attention. This is old school. You know, back in the day, your pastor wouldn't give you sermon notes. You just kind of had to wing it. And when I was a kid coming up in church, my youth pastor bought me my first ever journal for me to take notes in church because I was costing the church so much money in offering envelopes. Because I would take the offering envelopes out of the back of the chair, open them up, like rip them open, and then I would take my notes or draw in that. He was like, you are literally stealing. Stop destroying church property. Here's a notebook. So, sorry. You know what's great? If you flip over last week's sermon, this week's sermon is on there. So just use that. Thank you. All right, Luke chapter 14. This is a pretty short chapter, so we're going to cut it in half, though. But what we have here in Luke chapter 14 is the last time that Jesus would be invited to a dinner. The last time that he spends time with a group of people called the Pharisees. Like we've talked about before, he's making his journey towards Jerusalem. He's heading there. He knows full well that he is going to be arrested, that he is going to be crucified, and then 3 days later he will rise again. And he's been telling his disciples this. But they are making that journey there. They're heading down that way. And on the way, he stops and is invited by a group of Pharisees to dinner. And dinner culture 2,000 years ago in the ancient world was very different from dinner culture today. In fact, the sermon title for today's sermon, is Banquet Manners. Like, he's invited to a banquet. He's invited to a dinner. And this concept of a banquet, I'm sure some of us in here have been to like a sports banquet or maybe like a dinner banquet, some version of that. But 2,000 years ago, a banquet was this really, really profound concept and a display of generosity, hospitality. It was also a way that you would show and mark your social standing. And so it was huge. And it's very interesting that Jesus, throughout the New Testament in his teachings, talks about a banquet to come. And then if you read the book of Revelation, it talks about that the very end, what happens at the end of the age, what God brings his people to, that when he grabs the church and he gathers his church in the New Jerusalem, it's at a banquet feast. It's at a dinner feast. In fact, it's the wedding feast of the Lamb. So it's when Jesus has he uses this marriage analogy of there being that reception after the wedding. And that's what heaven is. It's this perfect party where everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody is known by the banquet host. And this concept is throughout the New Testament. And Jesus, at this dinner, uses this very normal, commonplace event that happened in society to teach some very, very profound and game-changing things. So if you have your Bible, go to Luke chapter 14. For those of you guys who like totally rely on a screen and don't bring a Bible, I'm so sorry. It's on your phone, so there you go. Luke chapter 14, verse 1. One Sabbath, when he went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees. All right, stop. Sorry. I think it's really powerful here. I think it's easy. If you've been in church for a long time, or maybe you're new to church, I don't know, but if you've been in church for a long time, we know that the Pharisees are the bad guys. And to a certain degree, they are. But they are the religious elite who have taken their religious legalism and turned it into a hammer against the people. And this is what Jesus comes to combat. And he breaks down their system. But what's so powerful is that in doing so, he still doesn't give up on them. Like, so Jesus came for the broken, the wretched, the sinner. He came for those on the far end of the sin spectrum that we kind of create in our minds. But he also came for the people who think they have it right. Like, he didn't give up on this group of people. Like, the religious elite who, lorded over everybody with their religious dogma and their pious actions, but it was all, for show. Jesus didn't give up on them. He could have been like, you know what, if you're going to be that guy, but leave us all alone. He was like, no. You're inviting me to a dinner. I'll go to that dinner because I still care for you. Like, he was still trying to redeem this group of people. I think it's amazing that in Jesus' system, the power of the gospel is that he goes towards the enemy. Yes, he goes towards the broken 100%, but he also goes towards the person who thinks they're not broken. He goes towards the person who thinks they've got it all figured out. So he's invited to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees, and they were all watching him carefully. This is verse 2. And behold, there was a man before him who had dropsy. And Jesus responded to the lawyers and the Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? And they remained silent. And they took him and healed him and sent the man away. And he said to them, Which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on a Sabbath day, will not immediately pull the son or the ox out? And they could not reply to these things. Now, this is very reminiscent of last week because it's the same kind of issue. The Pharisees had three major areas that they were kind of keen on: purity laws, Sabbath laws, and tithing laws. They were there are three pillars of the Pharisee culture. And Jesus is addressing the Sabbath one in a big, big way. Now, he's at this dinner party. It's a ruler of the Pharisees hosting the party, and that means that the whole rest of the party would have been the religious elite. It would have been Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes. It would have been like officials, government officials, people who had power and authority. And Jesus is there in the room, and there's a man who has dropsy. And it's a condition that we can fix today. But in the ancient world, it was a pretty intense condition where if you had dropsy, what it was an inflammation and a retaining of liquid in your body. And so your body would actually bloat in different parts, and that would put a lot of pressure on your body, and it would hurt. It's like if you've ever had like a blister. You had that blister, and it swells up, and until the blister pops, that's not, That's kind of what it was like, but all over your body, but it was water under your skin that would bloat out, and it was physical. Like, you could see it. If somebody had dropsy, you knew they had dropsy. And in the ancient world, they didn't look too kindly on people who had dropsy. It was like they thought it was a curse that as a sign of your gluttony, as a sign of your greed. Like if you had a big swollen, and the biggest area that it would swell up was in the stomach, and it would swell up in this big way, your arms and your legs, but it would show up in your stomach, and they would be like, oh, it's because you're a greedy person. Like you got cursed with this sickness because you have this, this inside urge for more and more, and you're never satisfied, and it's just, and they had no cure for it back then. You just had this condition until eventually it would put pressure on a nerve, or it put pressure on a blood vessel, and you would die. But he was a Pharisee, and so he kind of had this, like, he's rich, he was using it was like a sign that he was using his wealth as a Pharisee to live a lavish life. And so there's a person in the midst who, even though the Pharisees would have been like, yeah, this dude is, he's the Warren Buffett of the group. He's like very keen on his money, and he's kind of a jerk about it, but he's one of us, and he's a glutton. And Jesus looks at this guy, and not necessarily that those things were true, but that's just what they have assumed of somebody who had this condition. This man might have been a very generous person, we don't know, but the people would have assumed this guy's bad. Like, this guy is greedy. And Jesus looks at the man and cures him. And he cures him in front of everybody in a very public way. I love the fact the man doesn't ask for it. He's just at a dinner party. He's at the dinner party hanging out, and then all of a sudden his condition that would kill him is removed completely. In fact, I think it's kind of amazing that once it's gone and removed, he leaves. He's like, I'm out of here. I'm done with these people. Like, I'm fixed. I'm cured. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. And he just dips. And I love that. if you're at a dinner party and you just leave immediately, I think you would be okay if you left. If you were at the dinner party and your leg that was broken just became fixed, you're like, I'm done. I'm healed. So the man leaves, and Jesus looks to the group and goes, was that lawful for me to do? And he puts them into something, because they have physically seen a miracle. And this is what we see in John chapter 3, in that when Jesus has this conversation with a Pharisee named Nicodemus, and that's where we get John 3:16, this very, very important, theologically deep passage where Jesus is having this conversation with Nicodemus, and the conversation starts that Nicodemus comes to see him at night, because he doesn't want to ruin his reputation as a Pharisee, but he tells Jesus in the first, he's like, we all know you're right. He goes, but we can't publicly say that. He tells Jesus, we know you are from God. We've seen the things you do. We cannot deny the miracles you are doing. And so they all at this dinner party see Jesus heal this man. And he goes, okay, was that against the rules? Somebody just had their life given back to them. That man was headed towards death. And now he is headed towards life. He is healed. He's redeemed. Should I have done that or should I have not have done that? And it's a trick question, of course. And it's that funny kind of trick question. I don't know if you guys did this when you were kids, but when I was a kid, one of the funny trick questions we would ask our friends is that and this is messed up, but whatever. But we would ask, hey man, we would say, let's play yes or no questions. You have to answer yes or no. And we would say, does your mom know how dumb you are? And they would be stuck in a yes or no response, and you've got them bamboozled either way. They say, no, she doesn't know I'm dumb. Gotcha. Or she would say, yes, she does. She does know I'm dumb. It was great. It was like a trick question. I'm not saying you should do that, but it's kind of funny. I like it. That's what kind of kid I was. I'm sorry. And grown up. Anyway, Jesus puts him in this trick spot. He goes, you either have to publicly announce that I did the right thing, or you have to say that I did the wrong thing and deny that a man had his life redeemed and a man had his life saved, and say that the healing of a man's life was wrong. And he calls out their hypocrisy. And that's what it is. He says in verse 4, they remained silent. And he said to them, which of you, if your son or your ox fell into a pit? I love the comparison. I gotta think your kids are like, huh? Why am I in the same boat as the donkey? The farm animal. If the farm animal or your firstborn child falls into a pit, he goes, which of you would not jump into the pit to go and rescue the child or rescue your farm animal? And in the Old Testament, the idea of the Sabbath is a big concept. It really is. God creates all of existence in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rests, but he doesn't rest from this place of being sleepy or tired, or he's run out of energy and he's got to recharge. But what he's doing is creating a pause. He's creating a moment to stop and for there to be nothing else going on, to sit in silence and to sit in an observance of rest. And he tells Moses through the law, hey, one of the 10 Commandments is I want you to keep the Sabbath day holy. Keep it separate. That's what the word holy means. Keep it apart from all of the other work so that little break, that once a week break, shows that you need to rely on me. You have to hand that over to me and trust me with your 6 days. The desire for wealth, the desire for work is going to push you to want to work all the time. And I think we live in a culture that is living this. We almost have this mark of pride to work, 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week. It's the grind, it's the hustle. I'm trying to make all that bank and whatever. And God looks at it and says, no, that's not good for you. You need to trust me with less. Create a little bit of margin in your life. And that's the same concept that governs the tithe that he gives them. He's not doing the tithe because he says, I need your money. He says, I want you to have margin in your life. I want you to have a little bit of a buffer. I want you to have some space. I need you to have room to trust me. And so the Jews and the Pharisees at the time took the Sabbath and turned it into an idol. They took a good gift from God, a day off, and turned it into an idol. And so Jesus looks at them and he confronts their hypocrisy. He confronts their idol and says, which one of you would not jump into the pit to rescue your own child? He goes, shoot, you would jump into the own pit to rescue your ox. And that's true. They would. They had these loopholes. They would use these legal loopholes. They would say, you can't work on the Sabbath. And we've talked about this before. You can't spit on the Sabbath because if you spit on the Sabbath, it hits the dirt, parts of the dirt, you're farming. They had all these extra rules that you can't do this, you can't do this. But then if it was their own property that fell into the pit, they were like, I got to go in there and get it. I'll do some work for me. It was this concept of grace for me, but not for thee. I'm going to follow, you have to follow the rules, but I get a little bit of leeway. It's the law when it comes to our friends and our family, but we want grace. Well, you didn't know what I meant. You should give me a second chance. And this is very true for us today. I think it's our instinctive nature to lean towards being far more judgmental towards those around us and far more graceful to ourselves. And Jesus calls us to flip that upside down. Like, we should be extremely graceful and overly graceful and give people second chances and the benefit of the doubt to everybody around us. And then we should be honest with ourselves and be a little bit more judgmental when it comes to our own sin. Jesus is calling this out. He goes, you would break the law to rescue your own property, to rescue your own blood, but yet you wouldn't allow me to break the law. It wasn't breaking of the Sabbath, but you wouldn't allow me to break the law in order to save this man's life. You don't care about this man. You see him as a thing. You don't see him as a person, as a son or a daughter of God. And that's a key thing, that a follower of Jesus has to see the people around us and see the people around us. We deny this whole concept that's in the modern world of like looking at people as the NPC, right? That they're the non-player character, we're the main characters, and everybody in the encounter is just some random person. No. Every person you have ever seen in your life, every person you've ever walked past, the person who makes your coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, amen, to every person that you pass at the gas station or pass on the street, every single person you see is a person that God uniquely crafted, that has the image of God on them. The imago Dei, the thumbprint of the image of the Creator, is on every person you've ever met. The thumbprint of the Creator is on the person who you can't stand, the person who betrayed you, the person who lied to you, the person who left you, the person who curses your name to this day. God's image is on all of us. And I have to remind myself that my enemies are not my enemies. The people that I oppose, I need to see those people for how God sees them. The Christian life is moving my vision to look at people the way that God looks at people. And he looks at them with a broken heart, with love, with mercy, second chance upon second chance. And this is the crux of the gospel, is that I have to show the love of God when I don't want to. I have to show the love of God when it costs me something. I have to give to others what I would want them to give to me. And this is a challenging thing. And the Pharisees at the time didn't want to play this game. And in verse 6, he says, they could not reply. They were left in their shame. They are utterly in their shame. Now, if you go to verse 7, he tells them as a parable. He uses an illustration to talk about another topic that they had kind of issued. So he says this in verse 7. He told a parable to those that were invited at the party, and he noticed how they chose their places of honor, saying to them, when you get invited to someone's wedding feast, don't sit down in a place of honor, unless someone that's more honorable or more distinguished than you would be invited in, and then you would have to be asked to move down and give up your seat. You will then be given shame, and you will have to take the lowest place. But when you get invited someplace, when you get invited to a party, you should go to the lowest place, so that when your host may come to you, he would say, hey, friend, you're in the wrong spot. Move up higher. Then you will have honor in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. So if that first passage, that first little chunk is talking about the hypocrisy of the Sabbath, what here he's talking about is their hypocrisy of their pride. And he addresses their pride. He says, no. If you were a follower of God, if you were a true follower of God, you would be a humble person. And humility is not this like, woe is me. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie. I watched this as a kid. Probably shouldn't have, but Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Fantastic film. Very good. British humor. If you don't like British humor, you would hate this movie. But if you like British humor, which is kind of like dark, not dark, but it's like blunt. How do you describe it? What's the word? Joanna, how do you describe British humor? Flat? Sarcastic. It's so good. And in the movie, it's like about King Arthur and the knights and all this stuff. And there's a set of monks that in their piety in the movie, they're trying to be as like pious as possible. And they're trying to be as humble and as like lowly as possible. And what they do is they walk around with a board in their hand, like a 2x4, and they're chanting and hitting themselves in the face. Like, woe is me. And it's like, oh, boom. And they had just like 10 of them walking in a line, hitting themselves in the face as a mark of like humility. And I think sometimes that's what we think, oh, if God wants me to be a humble person, I have to like think I'm a scumbag. I have to like really think I'm the worst. And no, I stink. Oh, hey man, I really like how you did that. No, I'm the worst. This past week I got to go home and visit my family and some of the churches that help support us, which is amazing. With that, we have two churches that helped start this church. This church didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Two churches in the Boston area helped plant this church. But churches across the United States, especially in the Southeast, Southeast, like helped to fund and help get this church going. And this past week, I got to go down there and visit a lot of those churches that help get us up and going. When those teams that come up throughout the year, those are the churches that send us their teams. And it was just an amazing past week, and I got to play golf with my brother. Disaster. I play golf like once a year, and it's with him. And so we played golf, and he tells me he has his buddy that he can't stand playing golf with, but he's kind of trapped into playing golf with him because every shot the guy makes, he goes, that was the worst shot of my life. He'll hit a bad shot. It'll go straight down the fairway. And Adam's like, hey, great shot. And he's like, not as far as it should have gone. Oh, like this. Like every good thing he does, it's not good enough. And I think sometimes we think that's how I have to be with humility. And he says, no. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of you less. That's a key integral thing there. It's not thinking less of yourself. God laid down his life for you on the cross. But it's thinking less of you. Like, when it comes to our inner thoughts, we love and we care for ourselves more than anybody else. And humility says, no. I will lower myself and I will place myself in a place of humility. And he uses this illustration of the seating chart, which is kind of wild. We don't do this today. We don't have a seating chart. Imagine if we did, if you went to a wedding and they were like, hey, you're at table 10. I don't really like you. Like, you barely made the cut. And if you were at table 1, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm the big dog here. You know, it's like a place of pride. But 2,000 years ago, that's how they arranged wedding feasts, which is really, really savage. If you just barely made the cut, you're at the back of the room. And that's how they would arrange it. But at this dinner party, they had the same kind of thing. They had priority seating, where the higher up the social ladder you were, the closer you got to sit to the head of the party, and you were closer to where the action was, and if you were just kind of like an acquaintance, you were further down the line. So in this situation, the man with dropsy would have probably been as far down as possible next to, Jesus most likely would have been down there with him, and they all would have seen it happen, but it was far down the line. But when you get to a banquet party, the doors would have opened, and it would have been a mad dash scramble. They would have sprinted in there. Imagine like Black Friday back in the old days when the doors at Macy's opened and people were like elbowing each other for a TV. Like, it would have been that idea of like, I got to get to the best chair. But if you got to a good chair that was above your social standing or above how much the party owner, the guy who started the party, liked you, he would come to you in front of everybody and say, hey man, you're in the wrong seat. You should be down there. You see the dude with the swollen belly? That's who you sit next to. And it would have been this huge public humiliation ritual. It would have been like, no, you're in the wrong spot. And Jesus says, you guys are living this way. You're so conflated with your ego. You've so filled yourself up with pride and self-love and this idea that it's all about you, that you're the main character. And this idea of pride and humility runs throughout the entire New Testament. James, the brother of Jesus, in his book, James chapter 4, verse 6, he says, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Pride puffs us up. It blows you up, makes you feel like you're big and bad, like you're invincible and you could do anything. And God says, no. I oppose that mentality. You think you're better than people, you're on the wrong team. That if you in your mind think, I'm this, I'm that, I deserve this, I should have gotten that raise, I should have got that, I'm the man, God looks at it and goes, you need to slide down, buddy. Like, you need to slide down. Because I reject that. And what he says, Jesus says that when you go to the party, you get invited to the dinner, what you should do is you should go down there and sit next to the dude with dropsy. You should go all the way down. You should sit as far away as possible. Put yourself into a place of humility. I think it's a crazy life lesson that if you won't humble yourself, life will humble you. Like, life will do it for you. And Jesus says, no, be proactive in your humility and live a humble life. Like, don't seek the places of honor. Don't seek the adoration from man. Don't seek the praises of others. And don't seek climbing some social ladder. Place yourself in humility because you should see yourself as valuable from God's eyes. I don't need man's approval of me. And that's that's an easy thing to say at church. Easy thing to say in here. It's a very difficult thing to live outside of this building. It is. I don't want to say that flippantly, like, oh, we shouldn't care what people think of us. Are you kidding me? We all do. It's instinctively. It's tough for us not to second guess ourselves and to feel like, I'm not doing this right, or I want my friends to like me more. Like, we want to be liked. And bad news for everybody who's a middle school or a high school, this idea of wanting your friends and people to like you never goes away. Like, ask your parents, ask anybody else. All of us adults are still very hyper aware of how we're seen by other people, and we want to be liked. We do. Maybe we don't want to be like popular or rich or famous, but we still want to be liked. We still want to be accepted by those around us. And that's the thing. In and of itself, there's nothing wrong with somebody liking you, with a group of people thinking you're fun to be around. That's not the issue. The issue is you saying, I want man's approval more than God's. Like, I'm going to live for I'm trying to get to the next chair up. My whole life is I just want to slide one chair to the left, one chair to the left, one chair to the left. I just want to move up that ladder. I need more. Me, 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 me. Give me, give me, give me. And Jesus says, no, no, no. A follower of Jesus, a follower of God, a true follower of God is somebody who will place themselves in a lower position. He says in verse 11, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. You can live your life of pride. You can live your life of trying to get people to like you more, but life will get you. It'll humble you, and you don't want that to happen. It's a lot more painful to be humbled by somebody else than it is for you to push yourself in a place of humility. Trust me, it's way better to humble yourself than to be humbled by somebody else. I'm not going to tell an embarrassing story. Verse 12. Let's move on. Some of you guys are like, what? No. Verse 12. Moving right along. And so he tells a parable. So he says to the man who had invited him, he goes, when you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your rich neighbors, lest they can invite you in and return or be repaid. So he's talking about back to that ancient culture of banquet invitations, and that you would use an invitation to a party as like social capital. You would invite somebody, and there would be like strings attached. And I have a family member who's this way, that when you give her a gift, she's like, well, now I have to give you something that's equal or greater, like I owe you. And he's saying here, that's what the culture was like. He's like, no, don't, you invite people to a party so that you can be seen, so that you can be seen as more popular, and then it kind of puts the person who is invited into a deficit. That was the culture of the time. So if this guy, this Pharisee, this leader of the Pharisees who had invited all of these people to this party, now they are socially obligated to pay him back. So he wasn't having a party because he wanted to be hospitable, because he wanted to be kind to his friends, because he was, no, I need to have a good time. I want to enjoy being in their company. He threw this party in the first place so that he could get something from them. For him, it was like a bait and switch. He's like, come on in. I made lamb. Have a seat. Guess what? You owe me this. And it would have been like this, it was an exhausting lifestyle. And that's what they all lived in. And Jesus calls this concept out. He calls out this principle and he says, when you have a dinner or a banquet, don't invite the people that are going to have to owe you. Verse 13, but when you give a feast, instead, I want you to invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed when you do that because they can't repay you. And you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just. He's saying, when it comes to these like social maneuvers and trying to earn something and trying to get your friends to be in a deficit to owe you back, he says, no. You and I should be generous to people who can never pay you back. We should be generous with our time, talents, and treasures in a way towards people who could never give it back to us. If we give something to somebody else with the expectation of it coming back, then there is no kindness in that. That's a transaction. You weren't being generous. You weren't being kind. That wasn't kindness. That was a business move. And Jesus is saying, when you're having these interactions with the people around you, don't treat the people you're around like they're business partners. Treat them like somebody that could never pay you back and give with no expectation in return. This is the radical generosity of the New Testament. The radical generosity of the idea of what Jesus brought to us that frees us from this idea of money and wealth and instead moves me to a place where I need to be the kind of person who is a giver and not somebody who is looking to receive. Like no strings attached. This is a type of generosity that will cause the people around you to second guess and to take a second look at you. It's radical. And this is the gospel because Jesus died on the cross for people who could never pay him back. Like you could go to church every day for the rest of your life until you died, and you couldn't pay God back. You could read your Bible every day till the day you die. It would never pay God back. There's no deficit. We're not paying our way back. God gave a gift, no strings attached. When God laid down his life for us on that cross, there was no, okay, now that you did this, now you owe me. God's like, haha, gotcha, tricked you. When we're celebrating baptism today, it's not like the people who get baptized today, God's like, heh. Like, I got you now for the rest of your life. No. There's no strings attached. It's a humility, a placing yourself in a place of receiving a gift that you know you can never pay back. And Jesus then tells us we have to then in turn live that out. He uses this illustration. I love this in verse 15. It's kind of funny. He's telling all this. You'll be repaid at the resurrection of the just. And then verse 15. When one of those who were at the table with him heard these things, he said, blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God. And I love that because this dude just blurts that out as like kind of like you ever been at a dinner party and it's gotten awkward and then somebody just says something dumb to kind of like break the tension? That's this guy. And he's like, okay, hey, blessed is everybody who's going to heaven. thinking he was, and it was a prideful statement this guy said, but he looked dumb in doing so because he's like, hey, blessed are all of us because we're going to heaven, right? And everybody at dinner's like, yeah, I guess so. And Jesus goes, no, hold on. He's like, first of all, and this is what Jesus said. He goes, you know what? Verse 16, and then Jesus said to him, he tells a parable. He goes, a man once gave a huge banquet and invited lots and lots of people. And at the time for the banquet, he sent his servant to say to those who had been invited, come, everything is now ready. And they all alike began to start making excuses. Now, in the illustration, the owner of the feast gives the invitation. And when that invitation was set, that meant that it was time for you to come right then, right there. Once the invitation went out, there was no waiting, there was no delay. This is, of course, 2,000 years ago. No refrigeration. So if you were going to throw a feast, that meant that you had to kill one of your animals and prepare it to be eaten. And there was no like, okay, I'll just put this beef in the fridge and wait till you guys get here. It was like, we have already slaughtered the cow. We've already prepared the steaks. You got to come because this meat won't last forever. Like it was an urgency. And we've talked about this before, that Jesus gives this call, like last week with the narrow door. The call to salvation is a call of urgency. It isn't this like, I'll just drag my feet, and when I think about it, and when I get around to it. He says, no. The call has been come out. You need to go. But in this parable, the people who were invited started making excuses, and the excuses get progressively worse and progressively lamer as it goes down the line. And they all along began to make excuses. The first one said to him, I have bought a field, and I must go out and see to it. Please have me excused. So here's the thing. This dinner would have been at night. You see, this guy who made a major purchase of a field is going to go out in the middle of the night to go and look at it. Like, didn't you just spend a lot of money on this? Didn't you inspect it before you bought it? Of course you did. You've already inspected the field. That's a terrible excuse. Like, you've already done the inspection, and it's nighttime. You can't see. There were no lights. He didn't walk out to his field and hit the floodlights. He wasn't going out there in the first place. So he makes this terrible excuse. I bought a field and I have to go look at it. And another one said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen and I have to go. So he's bought 10 new oxen and I need to go and examine them. Please have me excused. So he buys 10 oxen and they would have already been in his home. And so he would have already inspected those in advance. And it's like, you're not going to go use them. If it was one thing, it was like first thing in the morning. He's like, I just bought these ox. I got to take them out and test them out. I just bought a new car. I need to go for a road trip. No, he bought these ox and they couldn't even start working at night. So the excuse just doesn't line up. It's a terrible, terrible excuse. And if you've ever been invited to a dinner party and you didn't want to go, come up with a better excuse than that. Like, hey, man, I got to take care of the cows. You better live on a farm. All right? The last one, Jesus kind of does a little like tongue-in-cheek. The third one is the worst because it would have been a social faux pas. It would have been really bad for this guy to have said this. And he says, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen. Let me be excused so I can examine them. And then another one said, I have just married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. I need to attend to her. Like, so this guy makes a honeymoon joke. Like, Jesus uses the illustration of a guy making a honeymoon joke would have been like a huge social faux pas. You would have never, when people talk that way in public in general, it's like very awkward. You're like, dude, chill, all right? Hey, get that out of here. And this guy says, I have to go attend to my wife. We just got married. And Jesus is like using a very shocking example, a very terrible excuse that somebody would have never made with good graces in public. And Jesus goes, these excuses are getting worse and worse. I have to take care of my field, I have to take care of my ox, and I have to take care of my husbandly duties, so I can't come. I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So the servant came and reported these things back to the master, and the master of the house was angry. And he told his servant, go quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city. It's very important that he says streets and lanes. And bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Bring in the people who will never repay me socially. Bring in the people that nobody invites to the party. And I want you to go to the streets and the lanes. And that word lanes is very interesting because he's talking about the hedges of the walls of a city. He's like, so I want you to go to the outskirts of the city, to the people who are not worthy. In Jewish law, there were certain categories of people who were not allowed to live inside the city. They could come into the city for work, but if they were a Gentile or they were ceremonially unclean, they would have to live outside of the city walls. They were not allowed in. And so he's saying in this story, I want you to go to the people who are not allowed to be here, like who aren't allowed to be in the city. I want you to go get the people who have, in their minds, gone too far. And this is the part of the gospel that gets me every time, because there's no lane, there's no hedge wall that you can cross that Jesus wouldn't follow after. you think you've gone too far. You think you've said too much. You think you've sinned too much. You think God would never forgive me for this sin. God would never forgive me for that sin. Like you think, God, if you knew where I'd been, if you knew what I'd said, if you know what kind of person I was, if you'd known the life that I was living, I'm too messed up. I'm too sinful. I'm too broken. And Jesus says, I call you in. I'll send my messenger to the outskirts of the wall. I love that it says, as the master sends the servant to the outside to go get the people who are not ceremoniously allowed to be there, according to the rules. The rules say you're a sinner and you're not allowed in. Grace says, it's my house. I can invite anybody I want. And grace has room at the table for you. Grace has room at the table for me. And all of the wickedness, all of our sin, all of our selfishness. Jesus was that messenger sent to the outside of the wall to call in the people who would never be invited to a normal party. And so he says, I want you to bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame, all of the people that you want. And then the servant says, sir, your command has been done, and still there's more room. He said, I brought in those people, and there's more space. Like, you got all this room in here. You have all this food. You have all this table space. And you have more room. And the master said to the servant, go to the highways and the hedges and compel more people to come in so that my house will be filled. For I tell you, none of the men who are invited are going to taste that banquet. He goes, the first group who had the chance, the first group who had the invitation, they won't get it. But I will have a people for myself. I will fill my house. I think that is to me, that is like the most powerful feeling, the most powerful idea that God is a God of community, and God is a God who is going to establish a people for himself. Like we don't just go to church. What we are doing right now on a Sunday morning is that we are gathering in anticipation of that feast, that huge banquet that God is having for us. And the nature of that beast is that it is open to everybody. It is open to everybody. It's not open to the people who are at the door of the city begging to be let in, saying, look how much we've tried, we've cleaned our lives up, we are the best of the best. No, when he says the hedges and the lanes, the people in the dirt, the people on the outside, the people in their filth and their sin, Jesus says, I've come for you, and I've got more room for you. And this destroys this idea that I have to clean up my life before I can come to the Lord. I would become a Christian, but I need to start doing some things right. I need to fix things about my life. And I've talked to people like this. I have family like this who are like, yeah, man, I would love to go to church, but first I got to get cleaned up. But that's the idea of saying, I need to clean myself before I take a shower. No. Come to the cross. There you're cleaned. Be rescued by his grace, by his mercy, and be redeemed. And this is why we celebrate baptism. Baptism is not, but what the word says, baptism is not what rescues you. It's not what makes you a Christian. It does not turn you into a Christian. Baptism is the public declaration that you have already given your life to the Lord. It is the public declaration. And matching with this illustration, it's you sitting down at your table seat. Like, Jesus set the table for you. He's got a chair for you. He's got a seat for you in that banquet hall. And baptism is you saying, I'm in, Lord, and then walking into it. Here you are. And so I think some of us were raised in a culture where, maybe you were dunked, you were baptized as a baby, and it was this idea that your parents' faith was given to you, that, with the expectation or the hope that you would become a Christian one day, or and some denominations even believe that if you were baptized as a baby, you're automatically a Christian. The problem with that is that there's nothing in the New Testament that talks about that tells us that. Those are offshoot deviations of the baptism concept. Like, Jesus himself was baptized. Why would Jesus be baptized? It doesn't wash away sin. Jesus didn't have any sin in the first place. But when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist at the beginning of his ministry, what he was being baptized in was in the Jewish ceremonial ritual of saying, I'm starting this new process. Like a Gentile could become a Jew, but the first thing that they had to do, the first ritual they had to do, is that they'd be fully submerged. They had to be baptized. That's why John the Baptist was baptizing Jews in the New Testament, because he was saying, this is the start. This is the new launch of the new wave that's coming, the new covenant. And then on this side of the cross, when you and I are baptized, baptism is the public declaration that just like Jesus was laid down into that tomb and was buried in that grave, and then 3 days later he rose, me being dunked, there's nothing magic about the water. It's hose water. I think it's clean, but And it's nice and toasty, too, I'll tell you that. It's like 85 degrees. It's a little hot tub action up in here. So when church is over and some of you guys are in there lounging, respect, all right? It's kind of nice. No bubbles, unless you make your own, all right? What? I had to have something there. Sheesh. I had no notes. What am I doing? I'm just So, with that being said, this whole passage, if we're talking about it, is the idea of humility, that Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath, and then the parable of the banquet is that there's room at the cross. There's room at the cross. There's more room at the table. This banquet concept is that you can never be too far for God, and these baptism waters are for you. So we've got a couple people today who are going to be baptized, who are following in obedience to what the Lord is doing in their lives. And we open it up. If there's somebody else in here who has never been baptized, or they want to get their baptism on the right side of their salvation, on the correct side of their salvation, where they've made the decision to follow Jesus, they are all in with the Lord. And then they have made the decision themselves to be baptized. Your parents dunking you as a baby, that was their faith. That was their good intentions. I'm not demonizing that. That was their good intentions. But it wasn't your decision. It wasn't your faith. And so on the other side of it, that's where baptism lives, the public declaration of what Jesus has already done for you. And if today is not the day for you, that's totally fine. But this is the first step of obedience. This is the first step of publicly declaring to God's own people, Jesus died for me. It doesn't save you or rescue you. It's a sign that you already have been. So I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to jump into our third song of worship. And as we're singing our third song of worship, the people who are going to get baptized can go get ready. And if that's you didn't make that decision before, you want to get baptized now, that's totally fine. You can come see me as well during this third song of worship. And then after we sing, we will then gather for baptism. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father,